Good evening, everyone. You guys are here today because you'll be moving to St. Petersburg with our company. So today we'll be showing you guys, letting you guys know a bit information about St. Petersburg. So your members today are myself, Amy West, the Human Resources Manager, and you've also got Cooper Shreve and Luke Zamurai, who are your Human Resources Officers. So we'll be introducing you guys to St. Petersburg today, looking at the expected business practices, along with some general information regarding St. Petersburg. We'll look at some topics that will influence how you spend your personal time and how to overcome some language barriers. So we're here to educate and prepare you for your relocation to St. Petersburg. We are here to avoid miscommunication and unrealistic expectations. We're here to smoothen your transition into a new workplace and to identify some cultural differences and some language barriers. So our purpose is to inform and prepare you for your relocation, to communicate and provide some realistic expectations, to aid your transition into a new workplace, to identify some cultural differences, and to answer any questions that you may have. So Cooper will be covering some general information about St. Petersburg, along with some expected business practices, whereas Luke will be looking at the lifestyle information and some key phrases and languages, and myself will be looking at how you might spend your own personal time, and we'll go over some summary, and then we'll have references and any questions that may be asked. We'll start off with Cooper.
Thank you, Amy, for that detailed introduction. I'm sure these guys are keen to get started, so we'll jump straight on in. So St. Petersburg is located on the eastern shore of the Baltic Sea, and that there would be the location. So we'll move forward. It was named after Tsar Peter the Great on the 27th of May, 1703. And it was named in honor of his patron saint, the Apostle St. Peter. It's often referred to as the Venice of the North due to its many rivers and canals. It's the second largest city in the Russian Federation and the fourth largest in Europe. It's got a current population of 5.5 million people, and for 2 centuries, it was classified as the capital of the Russian Empire. It remains a historical Mecca with rich cultural and religious background, some of which we're going to share with you today. So the bit about the currency, the Russian ruble is the official currency of St. Petersburg and the rest of Russia. Please familiarize yourself with the exchange rate and how this might affect your spending and overall disposable income. There's always something to see and do with your spare time, as there's a lot of attractions in St. Petersburg. Hundreds of years of history is portrayed through immense architectural and structural feats of engineering. To name a few, the Hermitage, St. Isaac's Cathedral, the Peter and Paul Fortress, and even the 12 stunning drawbridges add to your overall experience and stay. While we're on the topic of the drawbridges, I think it would be beneficial to mention how the city's 12 drawbridges can essentially depict your day-to-day life if you're stuck on the wrong side of them. 9 of the 12 bridges are raised regularly and 3 only on special request. Definitely familiarise yourself with the raised bridge schedule, the drawbridge schedule, so ultimately you can plan around those opening times. We'll move on now to a bit about the history of St. Petersburg. So as I mentioned before, it was founded in 1703 by Tsar Peter the Great. Has continued to build upon the extensive amount of history and infrastructure. Initially, St. Petersburg was built on swampland, and as mentioned before, Peter the Great loved his canals and rivers. Most residents of St. Petersburg are faithful to the main religion of Russian Orthodoxy, as around 91% of the population are followers. The only real tip I could offer here, guys, is not to make fun of Russian Orthodoxy or culture at all. Russians and the people of St. Petersburg are especially patriotic, so try and maintain constant levels of respect. The slightest joke can be misinterpreted and taken to heart, and there is some language barriers that exist within there as well. The culture and art in St. Petersburg is one of the oldest on the planet and remains a worldwide spectacle to this day. It's considered the cultural capital of Russia and is the breeding ground for so much of Russia's culture, religion, art, education, and overall creativity. Try to immerse yourself with the locals and any colleagues who might be staying nearby, as learning the Russian way is done by putting yourself out there and diving headfirst into conversation. Similar to the people, Russia's art and beauty is also best tackled by diving headfirst into the Hermitage, one of the largest art museums in the world. If that doesn't tick any boxes for you, you can definitely try one of the 221 museums, 45 galleries, or over 80 cultural establishments. We'll move on now to a bit about the location and geography of your St. Petersburg. It is located on the Gulf of Finland and allows for ease of trade and transport via ships. This means any large orders from Europe take little to no time at all. The same can be said for travel, as the sights and attractions of Europe are only a cheap plane flight away or even a car trip. On the other side of things, being so far north means that the climate is usually extremely cold, and in St. Petersburg, it can be very volatile. The average temperature is 6 degrees Celsius and winter is often accompanied by heavy snowfall. I'm telling you all this today because it will affect your day-to-day life. Often you'll be interrupted by a snowstorm, heavy rain, or just out of the ordinary weather. Always have that in the back of your mind when preparing for a day out. The time zone in St. Petersburg is GMT +3, so you're about 5 hours behind Western Australia. You may only have a bit of jet lag from the flight, but the main thing to remember here is when dealing with Australians or international partners, you need to take the time zone into account. We'll move on now onto a bit of the expected business practices around St. Petersburg. And while we're on that topic, I thought it'd be best to go over some business etiquette and dress code. So formal business etiquette is extremely important in Russia, as most businessmen remain stern, stubborn, and in some cases aggressive. The Russian way of business is very different. So all I can say is take time to listen to the conversation and only respond when invited to do so. In this situation, patience is key. Try not to overpush a point and instead wait for the right time to respond. All men in the group here today should be wearing dark, formal, conservative business suits with a shirt and tie. Dresses and trousers are acceptable for women, while casual or informal clothing for both is not acceptable at all in the workplace. A shake of the hand can make or break your business deal within the first few seconds. Always shake hands firmly when meeting males counterparts in Russia. Ensure to maintain eye contact and wait until invited to do so by females. Uninvited contact with women in Russia can be considered rude. Business cards are not mandatory, but to stay on the good side of your Russian counterparts, ensure you have professional business cards with English on one side and Russian on the other. This will for sure win you brownie points in all those meetings to come. Silences in Russia are not always a bad thing. As I mentioned before, patience is key, as many Russians will take time to think on a proposal and in doing so, remain silent for several minutes. Do not take this as a sign of negativity. If anything, it should be a sign of positivity, as your proposition was worthy of thought. We'll move on now to a bit about your working week. So office hours are 9 to 6, Monday to Friday in Russia, yet the average working hours are 40 for the whole week. The maximum is 50. Banks and admin buildings are closed on the weekends, but you can almost always find a currency exchange open 7 days a week. Lunch breaks are more extensive, so make sure you take advantage of that and explore as much of the beauty as you can. Strict overtime laws mean that little to no workers go above 50 hours per week. You legally cannot exceed four overtime hours in 2 days. So this is reflected as a yearly law. Overtime is limited to 120 hours for the whole year. It's paid at 150% of the hourly rate for the first 2 hours and 200% on top of that. Essentially, there's next to no incentive to work overtime. I'd recommend you try and refrain from overtime hours just to ensure you're operating within the lines. After all, this is Russia. You will be entitled to 28 days paid leave annually and will also have around 14 public holidays, which are also paid days off work. Some of those include your New Year's, Orthodox Christmas, Victory Day, even Unity Day. Definitely get yourself a public holiday calendar and make sure to plan around those dates with periods when companies are usually closed, such as the first week in New Year, first week in May, and even 2 weeks over summer. We'll touch on tax here briefly, as it's a bit different than in Australia. As in Russia, residents are taxed at 13%, non-residents are taxed 30%. After 6 months of being in Russia, you can apply for a residency test, prove you are now a resident, and your tax rate will revert back to the 13%. It's also important to note that the corporate tax rate is 20%. And at that point in time, I think, guys, we'll move on to some meetings and negotiations. So meetings and negotiations are extremely important in Russia, as they seem to be the main way to forge your relationships, both on the social and the business side of things. Your age and your title within the company determines your overall position at the table and within the organization. Often, senior Russian members will not give you the time of day because of your status. Do not let this deter you and remain confident and precise. This will show a sign of strength, as caving is a sign of weakness. Rushing tactics when negotiating can often get ugly. Emotion is used and over-exaggerated to push you to cave or pull back your proposal. Storming out of the room, yelling, grunting, even swearing are Russian tactics used in negotiation to leverage their position. Use this knowledge to your advantage and know when to stand your ground. Time is extremely fluid in Russia, so time management is something that is important to foreigners. You're always expected to arrive on time, yet Russian residents will more often than not arrive late or arrive late on purpose to test your patience. Do not be alarmed if they're late to the meeting or the whole meeting itself gets postponed. This is how things work in Russia. So your personal relationships in Russia are forged through your business relationships. And more often than not, a Russian businessman or woman will want to get to know you on a more social and personal level before they fully delve into business with you. They want to know your views, beliefs, and overall intentions. By drinking with them and showing signs of camaraderie, you can win them over and ultimately sway business deals and decisions by just purely being sociable and professional at the same time. Last but not least, we'll move on here to a bit of the patronymics. They are a huge part of the Russian society, and understanding them will help you in multiple social situations. The patronymic part of a Russian's name is taken from the father's first name and is usually the middle name of most Russians. Colleagues at an office will often call each other by their first name and patronymic name as a sign of respect. I suggest you spend some time learning this way as a way to impress the locals. Figure 14 here depicts it really well. The male patronymics always end in Ovich and the female end in Ovna. For example, my father's name is Nathan. You would refer to me in the workplace as Cooper Nathanovich. I know it's a pretty bad example using a Western name, but please use figure 14 as a guideline. Look, all the best with your journey here, guys. I'm sure you will end up falling in love with Mother Russia, and I'll pass you on to Luke to cover a bit about your lifestyle.
Thank you, Cooper. So lifestyle information. The key areas of lifestyle I'll cover are cost of living, public transport, living arrangements, and the medical system. So in terms of cost of living, St. Petersburg placed 59th in the world for cost of living in 2020 in comparison to Sydney, which ranked 66 in the same year. Although St. Petersburg has fallen from 30th back in 2013, it still holds an incredibly high price tag for its 5 million citizens. In terms of currency, 100 Australian will get you 5,400 Russian ruble. So when taking into account the average monthly net is 840 Australian and the average cost of living per month is 1,260 Australian, we can conclude that it is an expensive lifestyle choice to earn and live in St. Petersburg. On the flip side, being a traveller earning USD or AUD, St. Petersburg could be considered as a very inexpensive place to live. Therefore, it is important to be mindful not to show signs of disrespect through socioeconomic difference. In terms of transport, there can be a few difficulties. Anna Everywhere by Amy Carsten discusses these difficulties with the communication barrier, particularly when using minibus services that stop only on request. Although the signs are both written in English and Russian, it is recommended to use Google Maps. With this said, St. Petersburg does offer large bus services very similar to that of Western culture. The rail network in St. Petersburg is extensive and will assist in getting you to all those culturally unique places. The cost is also low, with a single trip costing roughly around $1.20 Australian. A hire car is also another option, but it is important to be mindful of the winter season and its impact on commuting. The World Travel Guides recommend not to drive due to traffic police, road quality, and restrictive parking areas throughout the city. This and its affordability is why a majority of St. Petersburg's 5 million citizens choose public transport. This particularly differs to Australia, where commuting is mostly done by private motor vehicle. Common living arrangement. Communal living is very common in St. Petersburg. Working class families often share large apartments or mansions, which are divided into individual dwellings. Many of the families rent out other sections of these apartments and renovate the high ceiling apartments with mezzanines for extra functionality. They also share facilities like bathrooms and kitchens between multiple dwellings. Therefore, it is very common to find a rostered system between all of the residents. The communal living arrangements was a result of mansions being seized by the state back in 1917. Australia's living arrangement differs greatly from St. Petersburg. Therefore, in terms of renting, it is important to be mindful of cultural difference, as communal living comes with its challenges. I can recommend platforms like Avito and Xian for finding rentals. The healthcare system. So in terms of medical system, it runs off a state-funded medical system similar to that of Western culture. This is only for Russian citizens and has faced much criticism over its structure and lack of funding. Private healthcare also does exist, but is funded through the employer. This is similar to the Australian Defence Force, where free healthcare is provided to serving members while they are employed. With this said, it is still very cheap to receive both dental and medical care. Consultations are around $65 Australian, with surgeries coming in around $260 to $670 Australian. In comparison to Westernized culture, it is rather cheap, but when considering 75% of the citizens earn under 803 Australian a month, this would become difficult to afford. Therefore, it is recommended that you have your own private healthcare or have it funded by the employer. This is due to the inability to be covered by the state's healthcare system. Key phrases in the language that would be useful to know. All right. So monolingual St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg is heavily populated by migrants, particularly from the ex-Soviet Union territories. With this said, its general disregard of cultural diversity leads to a monolingual society, which is favoritism towards Russian. So how many people do actually speak Russian? So the census data from 2010 illustrates a high percentage of Russians speaking population in the two major cities. It argues that the socialist government statistics contradicts St. Petersburg's true immigratory population. When observing St. Petersburg, it can be concluded that there is more diversity in language and ethnicity than the census alludes to. In comparison, Australia's 2016 census revealed 21% of households spoke a language other than English, with a total of 300 different languages spoken. This is important to identify, as a country controlled by a government that does not recognise language diversity can be very easy to be insulted or disrespected. Therefore, learning some of the language prior to arriving in St. Petersburg will assist in showing cultural respect and avoid unintentional misunderstanding. So body language and first impressions. Russian people are stereotyped for coming across as stern or unemotional with first impressions, generally not smiling or displaying effervescent behavior. This is a sign of respect, especially when speaking with older people or new people. The people of St. Petersburg are described as being very honest and take pride in their appearance. It is not until they are more comfortable that they will lower their guard. So in terms of key phrases, with the prominent language in St. Petersburg being Russian, I'll focus on greetings, niceties, saying goodbye in Russian. So it is important to know the difference between formal and informal greetings. In a work environment, you are expected to speak formally. Although when enjoying time with friends, you can use more informal language. Proceeding to niceties. Manners are important, particularly when setting up a good first impression. Remember, people of St. Petersburg value respect, especially with elderly. A few niceties will go a long way and avoid most common disrespects. In terms of goodbyes, with goodbyes, it is again important to identify with whom you are speaking to and the environment you are in. A little bit of Russian at the end will leave a good impression, assisting in maintaining and building relationships with the people in St. Petersburg. I understand this will be a lot to remember. Therefore, I've added a link to assist in pronunciation and give a better understanding of formal and informal language at the end of the slides. iTranslate is a useful app to assist in translating Russian. It is free and recommended to all employees transitioning to St. Petersburg. I will now hand you over to Amy to discuss leisure time. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. So, how you might choose to spend your own personal time. Obviously, this is dependent on factors such as gender, age, sociability levels, and personal interests. So I've gathered a few suggestions on how the locals like to spend their personal time. So during the working week, you'll be working 40-hour weeks. So you have 40 minutes less than what you're used to every single weekday. As work is more extensive and longer than what you're used to, it is in St. Petersburg considered leisure time. So it is important that you love what you do. There's roughly about 5 million in population. So I believe there'll be plenty of opportunities for you to find friends with common interests and morals as yourself. Those who are in the younger adult years, or like the 20s roughly, it's common that they spend most of the time in cafes and restaurants during the working week after working hours, and then hanging out with friends, while people who are generally in their 30s roughly, most likely new parents, who spend most of their free time at home. They love to spend lots of their own personal time hanging out with friends in their homes or working on their own educational development, whether it's learning a course for themselves or to further their own career, or they like to visit the beach after a long working day just to wind down a bit. So quality time with friends is very valued in St. Petersburg culture. They like to, as I said before, hang around, watch some movies. They like to drink, play drinking games as well, or board games, have a barbecue, or it's common that the locals have a home outside of town. So always a good opportunity for a weekend getaway. During the weekend, as mentioned previously, Europe is only a 3-hour drive. So it might be nice to go to Finland for a little skiing trip with some friends, or have a nice picnic in the park, or go shopping, or visit the nightlife, which has plenty of bars and clubs available. Or you might decide to indulge in theatrics, visit the opera, or watch the ballet, or work in your own personal development. Some popular picnic destinations are the Kirov Park on Yeligan Island. So the pictures below, they have some beautiful gardens, and it used to belong to the royal family, but it is now made available to the public. You've also got New Holland Park, which is a more modern take of a park, less traditional, as you have the artistic side with sculptures available to view. There's sitting areas for picnics. There's also playgrounds for children and restaurants and cafes available. Some popular shopping destinations are the Senya Shopping Mall, Pazar along Nevsky Prospect, and you've also got, for a popular general department store, which has been going for about 250 years, is the Bolshoi Gostiny Dvor. Shopping in St. Petersburg is very popular. It's also considered the fast fashion central. You might decide to indulge in some creativity by visiting the Mariinsky Theatre and watch the ballet, and in the beautiful architecture you may also appreciate. Or you might go to watch the opera, or you might decide to work on your own artistic side and take an art lesson with like painting and wine, or explore your own musical abilities, learn an instrument, or you might even just go around and appreciate the beautiful architecture in the city. Personal development is really privileged and valued in St. Petersburg. You may decide to learn a new language to help further your career, or for your own personal reasons. You may decide to start your own little side business. Lots of local women do create and design jewelry, whether it's for themselves or to sell inside the street. So pretty much there are lots of things to be able to do in your own free time. We have covered general information about St. Petersburg. We've covered some work life in St. Petersburg, like what to expect. We give some explanations and examples of costing and what your living arrangements might appear to be. We've also given a brief language explanation and some examples of some popular terms, which will be very helpful in your transition. And we've also given some suggestions on how to spend your own leisure time. So, did you guys have any questions made available for us? No? Okay. Thank you very much for your time, and please contact us if you change your mind about any questions. Thank you.